returned home, a very different woman. Little could she have known that within a year, she'd be dead. Few people were privy to the collapse of the couple's relationship behind closed doors. A chance encounter between Carol and her former landlady's husband was only a hint of the turmoil at home.
But she just did say that she had come back for the sake of the children. But I want to talk to Anne. I've been wanting to talk to Anne. I'll get in touch during the summer.
Whatever Carol wanted to discuss will remain a mystery. They were both teachers and broke up from school for the summer in July 1976. Carol was never seen again. Did he kill her that first night of the holidays? What row could have been worse than all the others that led him to bludgeon his wife to death while the children slept? No one missed her.
I suppose our thoughts of Carol only cropped up about once a fortnight, say, and we said, oh, we haven't heard from Carol yet.
We accepted that they'd probably gone off with the children.
It was nothing new for us to go a few weeks in between weeks, maybe a couple of months in between seeing her.
And so, you know, you were thinking, well, after the school holidays, she'd be popping round, and that would be it.
Carol didn't, but Park did.
When I opened my door, it was Gordon Park, and he told me that, you know, Carol was missing, and that when I questioned him, he said she'd been gone 6 weeks, and I was shocked, and I said to him, well, you know, has this matter been reported to the police? And he said he hadn't. I said, well, you must go down and do it now.
But he didn't. Instead, Park reported it to his solicitor, and he called the police.
It was just odd, you know. I thought it was a bit queer, this. What the hell has he got his solicitor for? Does he not want to speak to us for some reason? And then, of course, we found out that she'd been missing 6 weeks, which is a hell of a long time for somebody to be missing before his reporter. He intimated that she'd probably gone off with one of her boyfriends.
Park told the police he'd taken the kids to Blackpool on the first day of the holidays, and Carol had refused to go. On their return, he said she'd vanished. Clothing and jewellery were missing, but inexplicably, her handbag, money and rings were left behind. Bill Lawson headed to Park's home to question the children about that day.
No sooner got to the driveway and he was there, as though he'd been expecting me. Asked me what I wanted. I said, well, I want to know if the children had spoken to the mother and whether she had said anything to them before you went. And, well, I'm sorry, he said, you can't see the children. In any case, they're not here. Anyway, the children didn't speak to the mother. I seem to get the feeling that he wasn't sort of telling us everything he knew. And for several days afterwards, I was roaming the fields in the area, all around Leith Village, to see if I could find anywhere that'd been dug up. We just didn't like it. I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right.
But without a body, the police felt they couldn't even bring him in for questioning. For the time being, his secret was safe. It would turn out to be safe for another 21 years. Park got on with his life. He divorced Carol on grounds of desertion and remarried twice. He even continued to sail on Coniston Water. He lived his life seemingly untouchable until 1997, when Carol's watery grave was discovered by chance. Park heard the news while on holiday.
When Gordon Park had been contacted by his son Jeremy, from Jeremy's account, he said, "Oh dear." That was his reaction. And another thing that I particularly found strange was the fact he never contacted the police himself. You would expect them to contact the police and say, you know, I believe my wife's body's been found. What's going on here? What are you doing? What's happened? What state is she in? Etc. You know, and there was none of that.
He was arrested on his return and questioned for 2 days. The transcripts of those interviews reveal how Park toyed with the police.
There was never really any sort of acknowledgement in 1997 of how strange it is not to report somebody missing for 6 weeks. And he just tried to give the police the impression that, you know, she had gone missing before in these sort of circumstances.
What was your first thought in your head when she wasn't there? What were you thinking?
Here we go again.
Would you like to just explain that?
Not really, but I will. It's when a wife walks out and you don't know where she's gone or why. It's a very horrible feeling. It's just awful. You're totally disorientated. No doubt you've got experts who can tell you all about that. It's just not very good. And it's happened before. And so it's, as I say, it's here we go again.
And this is how you felt?
And you wonder what's going to happen this time, and if there's going to be another boyfriend, or what.
It was obvious that she just never had gone missing in them circumstances, and this was just an attempt to hoodwink the police. He didn't like to mention her by name. He didn't talk about her as you would expect somebody in a relationship, in what he tried to describe as being a loving relationship. The way he spoke about her was more, perhaps even as a commodity rather than a person.
Park was largely emotionless throughout, and police believe the few occasions he did break down was simply an act.
Did she make quite a fuss about wanting Rachel, or about wanting any of the other children? Or all of the children?
Now you're asking something I can't remember. I never understood it. I don't. Why I'm crying? It's bloody stupid crying, isn't it?
Are you okay?
I'm going to be okay. Stupid fucking questions.
Park never made any admission of guilt, but on the circumstantial evidence alone, the police charged him with murder, and he was remanded in custody in Preston Prison. But within months, the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. It seemed Park had got away with Carol's murder. Again.
And I felt very dejected then. I felt that we were never going to get to the root of the story. We were never going to hear the proper result.
I felt sad, I felt terrible, but I believe without question there'd come a day when he was rearrested, when there would be justice.
We thought we had the right man for the murder as well. Made it doubly frustrating, but it just strengthened resolve to keep on at the case and keep going until eventually we were able to solve it.
It would be another 6 years before police would finally get their man. They'd find their evidence in Coniston Water. The lake bed still held many secrets yet to be discovered. In a race against time, Cumbria police had failed to find enough evidence in 1997 for the case to go to trial. Park was a free man again. Over the next 6 years, the police would quietly piece together a new and stronger case.
We were aware that on the reinvestigation that we kept an open mind of any suspect that would emerge. We started from scratch, went through all the previously gathered evidence and developed new lines of inquiry. Only one suspect emerged, and that was Gordon Park. I think the first real breakthrough for myself was when Keith Churchman and I went through all the exhibits that had been recovered from 1997 and see basically what we could do with them. For example, 1970s clothing, sails with rigging with a large amount of different types and elaborate knotting on, rocks that had been recovered from the lake bed, forensic science had developed, and we may have experts that could provide valuable evidence, which in fact they did.
The first revelation came when forensics compared knotted ropes recovered from Park's home with those on the body. A 70-foot climbing rope had been wrapped and knotted around the torso and limbs, securing the body in a fetal position.
The level of security that the person had used to secure the package, knots had been tied, and then extra knots had been tied to secure the original knots, to such an extent that it was probably over and above what was required. It was almost like an obsession with security. Each knot in itself isn't unusual, but the way these knots have been used and the way they've been tied in certain sequences and in a certain way is very unusual.
In most cases that I look at, the people that tie the knots, whether it's a suicide or a murder, tend to tie granny knots or a succession of very simple knots, one on top of the other. And it's quite uncommon to find anybody that ties anything more elaborate than a reef knot. There was a bowline, which is a knot which forms a secure loop. This is a knot which is used in sailing and mountaineering, and it takes a bit of expertise to tie it. I wouldn't expect most people to be able to tie that. There were certain knot tying habits which seemed to show up. A number of the ropes had a figure-of-8 knot tied near the end. This is used as a stopper knot or to stop the rope from fraying. This was somebody who knew how to tie knots.
Gordon Park could tie those knots. He had ropes with similar knots, and he was Carol Park's husband. And he was probably the last person we know that saw her alive in 1976. So to me, that was a significant piece of evidence.
The next critical piece of the jigsaw was a rock found on the lakebed in 1997 amongst clothing and jewellery. It would be another 7 years when police divers revisited the lake before the link to Park would finally be revealed.
We found a shoe, and we also found a piece of Westmoreland green slate, which is under the silt near the body. For a piece of slate nearly 2 feet in length to be under the silt 250 metres out at a depth of 50 metres in the lake, a dressed slate, obviously it would have to be deposited from above. So we found that unusual, and we thought that may be linked obviously to the body and to the murder.
A search of bluestones, the home Park had built and shared with Carol, found similar slate in a garden wall. The police called in a geologist to examine the slate. As the rock had been found in the same area 7 years earlier, that too was sent for analysis.
And as it turned out, he was far more interested in the rock than he was in the slate.
It was able to give us a mineral profile. Analysing that with samples from bluestones, he was able to say that rock was more likely to come from bluestones, and certainly was unlike any rock in composition or sediment from the shores of the lake.
For me, it told me that the rock and the slate were probably brought to the lake with Carol Park's body. We were never saying this is the one piece of evidence that convicts Gordon Park. We were saying this piece of evidence supports the case against Gordon Park.
Other finds from the lakebed would link Park to the crime. Women's jewellery and clothing were recovered close to the body.
Why would that be at the bottom of the lake? We knew that Gordon Park had said that she'd taken clothing allegedly with her when she went missing. There was clothing missing from the house.
Few photos of Carol survived for police to identify the items as hers, so they sought expert help to try and date it.
Well, one of the most interesting items of clothing was this one, which is a lady's mini tunic. This collar, of course, is a feature that is found in the period round about 1972 to 74. It's what's known as a penny round collar for obvious reasons. And if we look at the buttonholes here, you'll see that they're arranged in pairs, and this was a particular feature of the period 1973-74. This garment's made of crimpoline, which is quite a well-known synthetic and very, very typical of the first half of the 1970s. We can see that it has the St. Michael trademark, which is the label mark for Marks & Spencer's, and it's the Junior Miss range. This was introduced in 1966, and it went on into the early 70s and beyond.
Magazine adverts were used to date makeup and shoes also found on the lakebed.
There are a number of pair of shoes that were particularly interesting in dating the material as well. It's a synthetic leather which has been banded in different colours, which again is a thing we find in 1973-74, and it also has this distinctive shading effect, a technique that they used on shoes in that period as well. Looking at the entire group of material, I was able to say that I was confident that the material dated almost exclusively from the early to mid 1970s. There wasn't anything I could see that dated from after 1976. I was also able to say by measuring some of the clothes that this was a person who was a size 10 to 12, so she was a fairly petite person.
The discovery